Hey YouTubers, it's Charlie. So big Game of Thrones Season 8 update. Joe Dempsey, the actor that plays Gendry, did a big preview of his character. He said he has a vastly expanded role during Season 8, so we gotta break it down. If you're finding me for the first time, be sure to subscribe to get all the Game of Thrones videos. Now that we're moving into the summer and they're finishing filming Season 8, they'll be done relatively soon. We actually got a real shot at getting some work print footage by Comic-Con this July, so I'll address that at the end of the video too. But he just went on this big tear talking all about Gendry. Like, Gendry is probably one of the more important but secondary characters in Season 8 just because of who he is, his bloodline.
Your Grace, this is
Prince Gendry, Your Grace. I'm Robert Baratheon's son, bastard son.
He was meant to keep that to himself.
Just a real quick setup, remember that Cersei still controls the Iron Throne. They'll need to rebuild the kingdom, and as long as anyone from Team Jon and Team Daenerys is still alive at the end of all this and in power, they can legitimize him, meaning that he could help rebuild the kingdom. So just very important in addition to all the special skills that he has in smithing. The biggest thing that he said during his interview was that just don't assume that because his part is bigger that he survives to the end. Obviously that comes with all the characters. There's like a little asterisk you have to put next to their names like, yes, we really love Jon Snow, but he's a very tragic character. So you just have to remember that Gendry survives doesn't automatically mean that he and Arya are going to ride off into the sunset and be happy together.
You will marry a High Lord and rule this castle. And your sons shall be knights and princes and lords.
No. That's not me.
This is me reading some of his quotes, so rewind to Season 3. He says, "For me personally, the only real hope I had for the character was that he would be there when the reckoning came. You got that sense, even back in Season 3, that this was a show that was building towards some incredible climax, so you just wanted to be there when it all happened. Not even necessarily just from a character point of view, but from a personal point of view, the actor himself, like just as an actor, regardless of what his role was, he wanted to be there on set when they were making the ending, that end game. So yeah, I'm very happy to be involved and be on set for Season 8. So that actually implies that he is around for whatever like their big final action set piece is. So what he's really talking about is like the big final battle, not necessarily the final episode, but obviously there's going to be tags with all the characters that survive because Dan and Dave are directing the final episode. They're not big action directors. Miguel Sapochnik is directing the episode before the finale. That's when like whatever the last big battle will happen, whether it's between the forces of man and the forces of the Night King, or if it's just at King's Landing between Cersei's remaining forces and the North's remaining forces. Just remember that everything is pointing towards the final battle taking place somewhere down near King's Landing. It just feels like that's where the series would have its last big fight, whether or not that's actually where the series ends. It's just that we've been talking about the Iron Throne for 8 seasons now, so why wouldn't you end the series there? It also even ties back around with Jon Snow's heritage in that running plotline of The Secret. Why did Ned keep that secret? He's the heir to the Iron Throne, so even though Winterfell is his home, King's Landing is really where the culmination of this big story is going to take place. We can talk about what happens with Winds of Winter and book changes and what possible different interpretation that George R. Martin has about the climax of this story, but the book is still a long ways off, so we'll just have to piece together book story while we're thinking about TV show story. So Joe Dempsey goes on in his interview and he says that they did tell him that they would come back to Gendry eventually when he rode off into the distance. They just didn't say when. And I think at various points along the way, Dan and Dave's plans for how the series would plot out, how many episodes they would do, has changed a little bit. So that's probably why you didn't hear more about Gendry coming back sooner. They just didn't know exactly when they get to him, and sometimes actor availability becomes a big problem. So you just have to imagine how bad it would have been if Joe Dempsey would have been busy when they were filming Season 7. It would have been terrible. He jokes about the increased level of security. The actors aren't even allowed to be on social media that much. Like, they all have profiles, some of them tweet things out, but obviously can't be anything about the show. He also jokes that probably the way to get secrets out of him is to get him rip-roaring drunk. So if you're a big fan of Joe Dempsey and you run into him at a bar, you're welcome to try. But really, Liam Cunningham is kind of like the Tom Holland, Mark Ruffalo of the Game of Thrones universe, like the person that just lets stuff out bit by bit that gives us an idea for what's going on. So if you're a little confused about why Gendry has a much bigger story even though they only have 6 episodes and all the actors are in the same place, meaning that there's fewer potential time for each of the actors to get like really big moments by themselves, just remember that the episode length has been expanded to what you would call feature length, like movie length. That's really anything beyond 60 minutes. Normal Game of Thrones episodes, like you go back a couple seasons, are like 52 to 55 minutes. So bare minimum, you're talking an extra 10 to 20 minutes per episode, which doesn't sound like a lot, but really what that is that's like 3 or 4 more really big scenes with different characters. So that's how you get more Gendry. Plus, because most of the actors are in one of 2 locations, most of those big scenes that they get as part of their storylines will be with other big characters. Like they'll have conjoined storylines. So like if you have a big Jaime scene, it will probably take place with Bran or some of the other main characters. So instead of just getting Jaime by himself and just getting Jon Snow and Daenerys by themselves, you're getting a lot of that all at the same time. And you have to remember where Gendry left off. So he was last seen at Eastwatch by the Sea. He was one of the first people back, meaning that he was probably one of the first people out. So he probably makes it back to Winterfell sometime during the first episode, but just sort of plotting things out. Like if you're thinking about that first episode, the really big stuff will probably happen first. Like Jon Snow and Daenerys making it to Winterfell is the big thing for the beginning of season 8. And then everybody else showing up, like Jaime showing up, Gendry showing up, having that reunion with Arya, Jaime pledging his support to Daenerys and Jon Snow, Jaime having that awkward reunion with Bran. Hey, remember that time that I pushed you out of that window? So really, there's only a couple episodes till Miguel Sapochnik directs episode 3, which is where I think the first really big battle will take place. So talking about Gendry's storyline, what is he going to do that's super important? What is his importance to the story? Because you only have a couple of episodes before the Night King arrives with his first big horde at Winterfell. So first real big prediction, we've all been waiting for Gendry and Bran to sort of magic up the recipe for Valyrian steel. We have dragons, we have dragon glass. We can probably reforge Valyrian steel. But the problem is that it would take a long time to teach that to other people and make enough weapons for the other armies that are sitting outside Winterfell waiting for the Night King's army to arrive. So the whole idea with the dragonglass mining at the end of last season at Dragonstone is that they would just be passing out dragonglass daggers to all the infantrymen, anybody that's going to have a chance of meeting a White or a White Walker in combat. Mostly thinking about the Unsullied, the Dothraki, because they're kind of like Daenerys' infantry and cavalry right now. So hopefully that addresses the potential for making Valyrian armor or special Valyrian weapons. I mean, it's always possible, but again, just does not seem like there's enough time. Like you could cover one of the dragons in Valyrian armor. Wouldn't that be badass? A dragon wearing dragon armor. But it would take forever to find that, and I would not be surprised if Daenerys loses one more of her dragons, but I do think, we talk about thematically, there'll probably be a separate dragon video where I talk about this, but the dragons will lay more eggs, there will eventually be more dragons. Like, this won't be the end of all things magic and dragons, even though it's the culmination of the story, and she's already lost Viserion. But the other big thing, like I said, that Gendry can help out with is on a political level, rallying support for their cause because of his bloodline. They trot him out as a Baratheon. All the former Baratheon supporters are much more likely to side with Daenerys when things are done, or if they need to raise new forces during the middle of the season. So remember, we talked about the issue of Jon Snow's parentage, about how the Lords of the North collectively hate Daenerys Targaryen because she's a Targaryen. They will probably freak out when they find out that Jon Snow is part Targaryen. But it makes sense that they lived through Robert's Rebellion. They're much more likely to go along with whatever plan that they have if they have the son of Robert Baratheon speaking up for Jon Snow and Daenerys. So I don't think it's going to be too big of a point. Hopefully they don't drag it out too much. Getting to the Arya of it all. I know there are a lot of Gendry Arya questions because there's so much unfinished business between those two characters. I could be your family. But now Arya is a completely different character. She doesn't want to be the lady of a castle, but the only way I see her actually sort of like riding off into the sunset, so to speak, with Gendry, is if she pays the price that George R. R. Martin has teased. There are rules about how they use their skills. They don't just go around killing anybody that they want, or there's a price to pay. So George R. R. Martin teased that because she's sort of a rogue, faceless person now, she didn't even complete the training. The only way I see her riding off into the sunset with Gendry is if she completely loses her sight and she needs someone to help her, so she just goes to live with Gendry. So let me know in the comments all your Gendry predictions. Joe Dempsey says Gendry much bigger in Season 8. How did they use him? What is his political importance? And how do you think they end his story? Does he become the Lord of Storm's End? Or does he wind up doing something more mundane, like just becoming a blacksmith somewhere, just living a normal life? The other really cool thing the Game of Thrones people just announced is that they're doing a 4K re-release of Season 1, meaning that all the seasons of Game of Thrones will eventually get 4K masters, so I'll do a giveaway for that when we get a little bit closer. But while you wait for everything, click here to listen to Sean Bean's new interview talking about Ned Stark, and click here to start getting ready for Westworld, which is starting later this month. Thank you so much for watching.